New York Mayor Mamdani once tweeted Karl Marx's words exactly. They're not trying to hide it. Their most popular influencer, Hassan Piker, thinks communism is so groovy. He laments the fall of the two of the most murderous regimes in history, the Soviet Union and Chairman Mao's China. Mamdani's aide, his top aide, Sia Weaver, said, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize property, it's over, and impoverish the white middle class. What? That's a goal?
That gasp from the audience says almost everything. Bill Maher isn't pulling some random label out of thin air. He's pointing directly at the language these groups use themselves. Seize the means of production, a classless society, and openly Marxist political organizing. Then Maher lands the punchline. How much more obvious does it have to get before people stop pretending they don't see it? What makes this moment so striking is that Maher is saying it in front of an audience that clearly wasn't expecting him to go there. The laughter suddenly turns into discomfort because the argument is no longer about Republican talking points or conservative media spin. Maher is forcing his own side to confront words coming from the movement itself, and judging by that reaction, some of them really weren't ready for what they were hearing. That reaction from Maher's audience is striking, but the argument gets a lot more concrete when you look at what was already happening outside the studio. Because while Maher was warning about the language of seizure, class politics, and Marxism, Scott Galloway was describing something far more personal. A policy he actually supported had suddenly turned into a public list involving hundreds of thousands of New York residences. And Galloway had one very simple question: why was this necessary?
And I've been doxxed.
You've been doxxed? What? Tell me.
So I don't know if you've heard, but Mayor Mamdani has decided to release a list of the 950,000 residences with addresses and names that might be eligible for his pied-à-terre tax. I came out in favor of this tax. This is the definition. He's taken a legitimate source of tax revenue and he's turning it into a wanted poster. And the question I would have is, other than trying to identify and imply these people have done something wrong, and then 18 months after a healthcare CEO was executed in the street and then published the list, what is the upside here? Why is he doing this?
And this is where the story starts to turn. Scott Galloway isn't some conservative outsider attacking the policy from the beginning. He says he actually supported the tax. His problem is what happened next. Once names and addresses tied to hundreds of thousands of residences were pushed into the public spotlight, he says a legitimate tax policy started looking more like a public targeting exercise. That is a massive distinction. You can argue over taxes, rates, and who should pay more. But once political pressure starts being attached to people's identities and addresses, the debate stops being purely about policy and starts becoming about intimidation. Galloway's question is the one that matters most here. If the tax was already moving forward, what exactly was gained by putting these people on display? Galloway is asking why a movement that claims to champion fairness would risk turning success itself into something suspicious. Bill Maher's answer is much more uncomfortable. Stop looking only at the policy and start listening to the ideology behind it. Because Maher argues these aren't vague accusations coming from political opponents, he points to Marxist rhetoric, calls to seize the means of production, and activists openly describing the kind of society they ultimately want. And once Maher starts laying those words side by side, his warning becomes much harder to dismiss.
New soon-to-be Democratic Congresspeople, Darlisia Chevalier, supports seizing all properties from landlords and said seize the means of production. Mamdani has said the end goal is seizing the means of production. I think they want to seize the means of production. Now, maybe you missed that in school or missed school altogether, but that's communism. Now the coalition within the DSA, called the Marxist Unity Group, is in ascendance, and I must take them at their word when their words include, our commitment is to the long-term struggle for a fully liberated, classless society, in a word, communism. What do they have to do? Tweet out, elect more communists? Oh yeah, Sia Weaver did that. Yes. Good, I'm glad you're shocked.
Bill Maher is doing something here that makes this moment far more powerful than a routine partisan attack. He isn't standing outside the Democratic coalition throwing stones at it. He's speaking from inside the liberal world and telling his own audience to stop pretending they can't see where this rhetoric is going. Maher's point is brutally simple. When political groups repeatedly invoke Marx, talk about seizing the means of production, and openly describe a classless society as the end goal, eventually the labels stop mattering. The language starts speaking for itself. That's why the audience reaction matters so much. Maher isn't trying to shock conservatives, they already expect this argument. He's forcing liberals in the room to confront ideas they may have spent years dismissing as exaggeration. And once Maher starts stacking the receipts one after another, the uncomfortable question becomes impossible to avoid. How many times does a movement have to tell you what it believes before you finally take it seriously?
That's for sure. So, to that end, was there ever a consideration for you, because of the priorities that you have, why take on the label of Democratic Socialist, knowing that it comes with a lot of other baggage that may not be helpful to you in your pursuit of what was it about what they were saying that drew you, as opposed to running as the things that you're suggesting to me? If you ran on these as a Democrat, I wouldn't say like, what the heck? It sounds very much in line with that. It sounds like what you're doing differently is you're being competent or, ruthlessly pursuing those goals and chipping away at them. So why take that on?
I want to be honest with people about what it is that I actually believe in. And I also think what we've seen over many decades is a fear-mongering in our politics, where anything that we disagree with or anything that portends significant change is described as if it is socialist, at times as if it is communist. And the intent of that is to end the conversation there and then. And it especially happens when you're talking about something that would disproportionately benefit working people. And I think it's important because we keep speaking about some of the inequities and inequalities that we see in our city as if they are bugs in a system as opposed to features in them. And if we truly want to reckon with 1 in 4 New Yorkers being in poverty, we have to also ask ourselves about if it's important to change the framework with which what we determine success to be. And also, being a Muslim Democratic Socialist, I thought it would be pretty straightforward.
You just saw well, what if I label myself something that scares people the most? I'm a Muslim Democratic Socialist.
If you scare them, you scare them twice.
And I'd like to run your public transportation system.
Yeah.
So is there, in some regard, is the idea being, if I can show myself to be a competent steward of the day-to-day functioning of maybe certainly one of the most complex city systems in the world, I can demystify. I can take these labels that are so loaded with fear, and I can maybe take a little bit of that caricature out of them.
And this is exactly where Bill Maher's argument becomes so difficult to wave away. Mamdani's response is essentially that words like socialist and communist are often thrown around as political weapons labels designed to scare people and shut down debate. And in fairness, American politics has absolutely abused those labels before. But Maher's point goes one step further. He isn't asking people to panic over a word. He's asking them to look at the rhetoric, the organizations, and the stated goals behind the movement. That is the collision happening here. Mamdani wants the debate to be about whether democratic socialism can deliver better government. Maher is asking a much more uncomfortable question. At what point do repeated references to Marx, class struggle, seizing the means of production, and a classless society stop being harmless branding and start revealing an actual ideological direction? You can call Maher dramatic. You can accuse him of exaggerating. But simply saying that's just a label doesn't answer the evidence he is putting on the table. And that is why this debate is getting so explosive. Maher isn't arguing over what Mamdani calls himself. He's arguing that the movement should be judged by what its own people keep saying they believe. Bill Maher's warning is simple. Stop arguing over labels and start listening to what these movements openly say they believe. Mamdani says socialist and communist are often used as political scare words. Maher's response is harder to dodge when the rhetoric keeps invoking Marx, class struggle, and seizing the means of production. People are going to take it seriously. That's why the gasps from Maher's own audience matter. He isn't preaching to conservatives. He's challenging liberals to confront what's happening inside their own political coalition. So is Maher exaggerating, or is he saying out loud what others are still afraid to admit? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more.